Welcome, brave souls, to Dreadful Diaries, where the shadows whisper secrets and the night holds untold horrors. If you crave the thrill of the unknown, make sure to subscribe and join our community of fellow horror enthusiasts. Now, dim the lights, grab a blanket, and let's dive into our first tale of terror.
It was a chilly autumn night when Sarah first heard the whispers. She had just moved into her new home, a quaint little cottage on the outskirts of town, surrounded by dense woods. The previous owners had left in a hurry, leaving behind only a few pieces of furniture and a lingering sense of unease. Sarah brushed it off as her imagination, a product of the eerie silence that enveloped the house. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers grew louder, echoing through the halls at night. They were soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but soon morphed into hushed voices that seemed to call her name. Sarah. Sarah. The sound sent shivers down her spine, but she convinced herself it was just the wind playing tricks. One night, unable to sleep, Sarah decided to explore the attic. The creaky stairs led her to a dimly lit space filled with dust-covered boxes and forgotten memories. As she rummaged through the clutter, she stumbled upon an old journal. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with frantic scrawls about a creature known as the Rake. The entries described a tall, emaciated figure with pale skin and long, claw-like fingers that would visit people at night, feeding off their fear. The more she read, the more her heart raced. The journal detailed encounters with the Rake, each more terrifying than the last. Victims reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, as if they were being watched. Some claimed to have seen the creature lurking in the shadows, its eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. That night, Sarah locked her bedroom door, trying to dismiss the journal's contents as mere folklore. But as she lay in bed, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. "Sarah, come play with us." The voice was chilling, echoing in her mind. She pulled the covers over her head, trying to drown out the sound. Suddenly, she heard a soft scratching at her window. Her heart raced as she slowly turned to look. There, in the moonlight, stood a figure, tall and gaunt, with elongated limbs and a face that was a twisted mask of hunger. It was the Rake. Paralyzed with fear, Sarah couldn't move. The creature's eyes bore into her, filled with a dark, insatiable longing. It opened its mouth, revealing rows of sharp teeth, and let out a low, guttural growl. The whispers intensified, filling her mind with terror. "Let us in, Sarah." In a burst of adrenaline, she leaped from her bed and bolted for the door. She fumbled with the lock, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Just as she managed to open it, she felt a cold breeze sweep past her, and the whispers turned into a cacophony of screams. Sarah ran down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the creature behind her, its claws scraping against the wooden floor. She dashed into the living room and grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. But as she waited for the operator to answer, the lights flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. The whispers returned, now a chorus of voices, each one more desperate than the last. "Help us, help us." The Rake was closing in, and she could feel its presence looming over her. In a moment of sheer panic, she turned to face the creature, ready to confront her worst nightmare. But as she looked into its eyes, she saw not just hunger, but a deep, aching sorrow. The whispers shifted, becoming softer, more pleading. "Help us, free us." It was as if the creature was trapped in its own torment, feeding off the fear it instilled in others. In that moment, Sarah realized that the Rake was not just a monster, it was a victim of its own existence. With a surge of empathy, she took a step forward, her fear giving way to compassion. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The creature paused, its eyes flickering with a glimmer of hope. "Release us," it rasped, its voice barely a whisper. "End the cycle." With newfound determination, Sarah reached for the journal, flipping through the pages until she found a passage about a ritual to break the curse. It required a sacrifice of fear, a willingness to confront the darkness within. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and focused on her own fears, the loneliness, the anxiety, the pain of her past. As she released her fears into the air, the room filled with a blinding light. The rake recoiled, its form shifting and twisting as the energy enveloped it. The whispers transformed into a harmonious melody, echoing through the house. In that moment, Sarah understood that she was not just saving herself, she was freeing the creature from its torment. When the light faded, it was a cold, moonless night when David found himself walking home from a late shift at the diner. The streets were deserted, the only sound being the crunch of gravel beneath his worn-out sneakers. He had taken this route countless times, but tonight felt different. An unsettling chill hung in the air, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than usual. As he turned onto a dimly lit street, David noticed a figure standing at the far end. The man was tall and thin, dressed in a dark suit that seemed out of place for the hour. What struck David most was the man's face, a wide, unsettling grin that stretched from ear to ear, revealing teeth that glinted in the faint light. The smile was unnaturally broad, almost grotesque, and it sent a shiver down David's spine. David hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. But he was tired and just wanted to get home. He took a deep breath and continued walking, trying to ignore the figure. As he approached, the man's smile only widened, and he began to sway slightly, as if he were dancing to a tune only he could hear. "Hey there," the man called out, his voice cheerful yet eerie. "What a lovely night, isn't it?" David forced a smile, trying to be polite. "Yeah, it's nice," he replied, quickening his pace. He could feel the man's gaze boring into him, and he didn't dare look back. "Where are you headed?" the man asked, his voice dripping with an unsettling enthusiasm. "Just home," David said, his heart racing. He could feel the man's presence behind him, as if he were walking in step with him, though David didn't dare look back. "Home? That's a great place to be," the man exclaimed, his grin never faltering. "I love homes. So warm and cozy." David's unease grew. He glanced over his shoulder, and the man was closer than before, still grinning, his eyes wide and gleaming with an unsettling light. David's instincts kicked in, and he broke into a jog, hoping to put distance between them. "Wait! Don't go," the man called, his voice now tinged with a hint of desperation. "I just want to talk." David's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted down the street, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence. He could hear the man's footsteps behind him, quickening as he chased after him. The laughter that followed was high-pitched and manic, sending chills down David's spine. He turned a corner, hoping to lose the man in the maze of streets. But as he ran, he could feel the man's presence looming closer, the laughter echoing in his ears. "You can't run from me," the man shouted, his voice now a twisted mockery of joy. Desperate, David spotted an alleyway and ducked into it, pressing himself against the cold brick wall. He held his breath, praying the man wouldn't find him. The laughter faded for a moment, and David dared to peek out. To his horror, the man stood at the entrance of the alley, his grin wider than ever. "I know you're in there," he called, his voice sing-song. Come out and play." Panic surged through David. He had to get away. He turned and ran deeper into the alley, but it was a dead end. He was trapped. He could hear the man's footsteps approaching, the laughter growing louder, more frenzied. "Why are you hiding?" the man taunted, his voice echoing off the walls. "I just want to be friends." David's mind raced as he searched for an escape. He spotted a dumpster and quickly climbed on top, hoping to find a way over the wall. Just as he reached the top, he heard the man's voice right behind him. "There you are. I've been looking for you." With a surge of adrenaline, David leaped off the dumpster and landed on the other side of the wall, rolling to absorb the impact. He scrambled to his feet and took off running again, not daring to look back. He ran until his lungs burned, until he could no longer hear the man's laughter. Finally, he reached the main road, where the streetlights flickered like beacons of safety. He collapsed onto the sidewalk, gasping for breath, his heart racing. As he looked back, he saw the man standing at the edge of the alley, still grinning, his eyes glinting in the light. "I'll be waiting for you, David," he called, his voice echoing in the night. "We'll be friends soon." David didn't stop running until he reached his apartment. He locked the door behind him, his hands trembling. He leaned against the door, trying to calm his. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to the supernatural. I grew up in a small town where ghost stories were a dime a dozen, but I never believed in any of them. That was until I moved into my grandmother's old house after she passed away. It was a charming, creaky place filled with memories, but it also had an unsettling aura that I couldn't quite shake. The first few nights were uneventful. I spent my time unpacking boxes and reminiscing about my childhood. But on the fourth night, things took a turn. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of soft whispers. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but as I listened more closely, I realized the whispers were coming from inside the house. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. The whispers were indistinct, like a conversation happening just out of earshot. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but the sound persisted. Gathering my courage, I got out of bed and tiptoed down the hallway, following the whispers. As I approached the living room, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. I peered around the corner, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering like candlelight, but there were no candles lit. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the streetlight outside. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. But curiosity got the better of me. I stepped into the room, and the whispers stopped abruptly. The shadows froze, and for a moment, everything was still. Then, as if sensing my presence, the shadows began to swirl and shift, forming shapes that seemed to reach out toward me. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response, just the oppressive silence that followed. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I turned to leave, but before I could, a voice broke the silence. "Help us." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was soft, almost pleading. "Help us," it repeated, echoing in the empty room. I felt a wave of dread wash over me, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Trapped," the voice replied, filled with sorrow. "We need you." Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, enveloping me in darkness. I felt a cold grip around my wrist, pulling me deeper into the room. Panic set in, and I fought against the unseen force, but it was too strong. I stumbled backward, falling to the floor, and the shadows receded, leaving me gasping for breath. I scrambled to my feet and bolted out of the living room, slamming the door behind me. I locked it and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, too terrified to sleep. The next day, I decided to do some research on the house. I visited the local library and dug through old newspapers and records. What I found sent chills down my spine. The house had a dark history, several families had lived there over the years, and many reported strange occurrences. Some claimed to have seen apparitions, while others heard whispers in the night, just like I had. But the most disturbing story was about a family that had lived there in the 1970s. They had a young daughter who went missing one night, and despite extensive searches, she was never found. The family eventually moved away, leaving the house abandoned for years. The whispers, it seemed, were tied to her disappearance. That night, I returned home, determined to confront whatever was haunting the house. I set up a camera in the living room, hoping to capture any evidence of the supernatural. As I prepared for bed, I felt a sense of dread wash over me, but I steeled myself, reminding myself that I was no longer afraid. Around 3 a.m., the whispers returned, echoing through the house. I grabbed my phone and turned on the camera, recording the sounds. "Help us," the voice pleaded again, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "Find her," the voice whispered, filled with desperation. "She's lost." I felt a surge of determination. "Where is she?" I demanded. "What do you want from me?" "Help us," the voice repeated, and the shadows began to swirl around me once more. I could feel their cold presence, but this time, I stood my ground. "I'll help you," I said, my voice firm. "Just show me what to do." The shadows seemed to pause, and for a moment, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Then, in the late 1940s, during the height of the Cold War, a group of Soviet scientists embarked on a secret experiment that would become infamous in the annals of psychological research. The goal was to explore the effects of sleep deprivation on the human mind and body, and to develop a method to keep soldiers awake for extended periods. The experiment was conducted in a remote facility, far from prying eyes. 5 political prisoners, deemed expendable by the government, were selected for the study. They were placed in a sealed chamber, equipped with a gas-based stimulant that would keep them awake. The scientists monitored their behavior through a one-way glass window, documenting every detail of the experiment. At first, the subjects exhibited signs of mild discomfort. They complained of headaches and fatigue, but they were still coherent and able to communicate. The researchers encouraged them to talk about their thoughts and feelings, hoping to gain insight into the effects of prolonged wakefulness. As the days passed, however, the situation began to deteriorate. After 3 days without sleep, the subjects started to exhibit strange behavior. They became increasingly paranoid, whispering to one another and glancing nervously at the observation window. The scientists noted that their conversations turned dark, filled with confessions of guilt and fear. One subject, a man named Alexei, began to scream about the voices he heard in his head, claiming they were telling him to do terrible things. By the 5th day, the subjects were showing signs of severe psychological distress. They had stopped eating, and their physical appearance deteriorated rapidly. Their skin became pale and gaunt, and dark circles formed under their eyes. The scientists, intrigued by the unfolding chaos, decided to push the experiment further, believing they were on the brink of a groundbreaking discovery. On the 7th day, the subjects began to exhibit extreme behavior. They started to mutilate themselves, tearing at their own skin and pulling out their hair. The scientists watched in horror as one subject, a young man named Dmitri, began to scream uncontrollably, his voice echoing through the chamber. "They're coming for me. They're coming for all of us," he shouted, his eyes wide with terror. The researchers, now realizing they had crossed a line, debated whether to terminate the experiment. But their curiosity got the better of them. They decided to observe the subjects for just a little longer, convinced that they were witnessing the limits of human endurance. On the 9th day, the situation reached a breaking point. The subjects had become unrecognizable, both physically and mentally. They were no longer coherent, their minds shattered by the relentless wakefulness. The scientists could hear them muttering to themselves, their voices a haunting chorus of despair. Suddenly, the power in the facility flickered, and the lights went out. Panic ensued as the researchers scrambled to restore power. When the lights came back on, they were met with a horrifying sight. The chamber was covered in blood, and the subjects were no longer in their original state. They had turned on each other, their bodies mutilated and lifeless. In the chaos, one subject, Alexei, was still alive, but he was barely recognizable. His eyes were wild, and he was covered in the blood of his fellow prisoners. "You have to let me out," he screamed, his voice a mix of desperation and madness. "They're in my head. They won't let me go." The scientists, horrified by what they had witnessed, rushed to the control panel to end the experiment. But before they could act, Alexei lunged at the glass, his face twisted in rage. "You did this to us. You have to pay," he screamed, his voice echoing in the chamber. In a panic, the researchers activated the emergency lockdown, sealing the chamber. They could hear Alexei's screams and the sounds of his fellow subjects thrashing against the walls. The scientists knew they had to escape, but the facility was in chaos. The power flickered again, and the lights went out once more. When the lights returned, the researchers found themselves alone in the observation room. The chamber was silent, the screams replaced by an eerie stillness. They cautiously approached the glass, peering inside. What they saw made their blood run cold. The chamber was empty. The subjects had vanished, leaving behind only the remnants of their torment. The walls were smeared with blood, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. The scientists exchanged terrified glances, realizing that they had unleashed something far beyond their control. In the days that followed, the facility was abandoned, and the experiment was buried in secrecy. The scientists who survived were left haunted by the memories of what they had witnessed. Whispers of the Russian sleep experiment spread through the underground, becoming a chilling urban legend. Years later, the story resurfaced, sparking curiosity and fear. Some claim to have seen the subjects wandering the woods near the facility, their eyes hollow and... It was a quiet evening when Jenna moved into her new apartment, a cozy one-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of an old brick building. The place had character, with creaky wooden floors and vintage fixtures, but it also had a certain charm that made her feel at home. After a long day of unpacking, she settled onto the couch, exhausted but excited about her new beginning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jenna turned on a few lamps to ward off the encroaching darkness. She flipped through channels on the television, trying to find something to watch, but her mind kept wandering. She felt a strange sensation, as if she were being watched. Shaking off the feeling, she attributed it to the stress of moving and the unfamiliarity of her surroundings. That night, as she lay in bed, the feeling returned. It was a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, a sense of being observed. She glanced around her dimly lit room, but nothing seemed out of place. The shadows danced on the walls, and the old building creaked as it settled. Jenna took a deep breath, reminding herself that it was just her imagination. The next few days passed uneventfully, but the feeling of being watched persisted. Jenna began to notice small things that made her uneasy. Objects would be slightly out of place, and she would hear faint noises at odd hours, soft whispers that seemed to echo through the walls. She brushed it off as the quirks of an old building, but the unease gnawed at her. One night, while she was preparing for bed, she heard a soft thud coming from the living room. Her heart raced as she grabbed her phone, using its light to illuminate the darkened space. She stepped cautiously into the living room, scanning the area for any signs of disturbance. Nothing seemed amiss, but the feeling of being watched intensified. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. There was no response, just the silence of the empty apartment. She shook her head, trying to dispel the fear that was creeping in. "It's just the building settling," she reassured herself. But the next night, the feeling escalated. As she lay in bed, she heard a soft whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. "Jenna." The voice was low and raspy, sending chills down her spine. She bolted upright, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she shouted, but there was only silence in response. Determined to confront whatever was haunting her, Jenna decided to investigate. She grabbed a flashlight and began to search the apartment, checking every closet and corner. As she moved through the rooms, she felt a cold draft, and the air grew heavy with an unsettling presence. The whispers returned, echoing her name, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. "Stop it," she yelled, her voice echoing in the stillness. "I'm not afraid of you." But deep down, she was terrified. She returned to her bedroom, locking the door behind her, and tried to calm herself. Sleep eluded her that night, and she spent hours tossing and turning, listening for any signs of movement. The following day, Jenna decided to speak to her neighbors, hoping to find some answers. She knocked on the door of the apartment next to hers, and an elderly woman answered. Her eyes were kind, but there was a flicker of concern as Jenna explained her experiences. "Oh dear," the woman said, her voice trembling slightly. "This building has a history. Many years ago, a family lived in your apartment. They were happy at first, but then strange things began to happen. The mother claimed she heard whispers, just like you. One night, she vanished without a trace." Jenna's heart sank. "What happened to her?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They never found her," the woman replied, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Some say she was taken by something sinister that lurks in the shadows of this building." That night, Jenna returned home, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. She felt the weight of the building's history pressing down on her. As she lay in bed, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. "Jenna, help us." Panic surged through her, and she sat up, clutching her phone tightly. "What do you want?" she shouted into the darkness. The whispers grew frantic, echoing around her. "Help us, we're trapped." In that moment, Jenna realized that the presence wasn't just watching her, it was seeking her help. She felt a strange connection to the voice, as if it were calling out for release. Gathering her courage, she decided to confront whatever was haunting her. "Show yourself," she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "If you need help, let me help you." The room fell silent, and Clara had always been fascinated by mirrors. Growing up, she would spend hours in front of them, practicing her smiles, her poses, and her makeup. But when she moved into her new apartment, a quaint little place with vintage decor, she found a mirror that would change everything. It was an ornate piece, framed in dark wood with intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story of their own. Clara hung it in her bedroom, admiring how it caught the light and added character to the room. Little did she know, this mirror held secrets far darker than its beauty. The first few days in her new apartment were blissful. Clara enjoyed the solitude, relishing the quiet moments after a long day at work. But soon, she began to notice something strange. Whenever she would pass by the mirror, she felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if the reflection was watching her, waiting for something. One evening, after a long day, Clara stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair. As she moved her hand through her locks, she noticed something odd. Her reflection didn't quite match her movements. While she brushed her hair to the right, her reflection seemed to linger for a moment before following suit, as if it were a heartbeat behind. At first, she dismissed it as fatigue, a trick of the mind. But as the days went by, the discrepancies grew more pronounced. Clara would smile, and her reflection would remain expressionless for a heartbeat longer. She would wave, and her reflection would hesitate, as if unsure whether to respond. One night, unable to shake the feeling of unease, Clara decided to confront the mirror. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, her voice echoing in the stillness of the room. The reflection stared back, its eyes dark and hollow. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something, fear? Anger, but it was gone in an instant. Determined to understand what was happening, Clara began to research the history of the mirror. She discovered that it had once belonged to a woman named Eliza, who had lived in the apartment decades ago. Eliza was known for her beauty, but she had mysteriously vanished one night, leaving behind only whispers of her tragic fate. Some said she had been trapped within the mirror, her spirit unable to escape. That night, Clara stood before the mirror, her heart racing. "Eliza," she called out, her voice trembling. "Are you there?" The reflection remained still, but Clara felt a shift in the air, a heaviness that pressed down on her. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room grew cold. Clara's breath quickened as she watched her reflection. It began to change, morphing into a figure that looked like her but with a twisted, malevolent smile. The eyes that once mirrored her own now glinted with something dark and sinister. "Help me," the reflection whispered, its voice a haunting echo. "I'm trapped, you must let me out." Clara stumbled back, fear coursing through her veins. "Let you out? How?" she gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. "Break the glass," the reflection urged, its smile widening. "Set me free." Clara's mind raced. She knew breaking the mirror could unleash something terrible, but the desperation in the reflection's voice was compelling. "What if you're not who you say you are?" she asked, her voice shaking. "What if you're something worse?" The reflection's expression darkened, and the air grew thick with tension. "You have to trust me," it hissed, its voice now a low growl. "I'm the only one who can help you." In that moment, Clara felt a surge of courage. She grabbed a heavy lamp from her bedside table, her hands trembling. "If you're lying, I won't hesitate," she warned, raising the lamp high. With a deep breath, she swung the lamp at the mirror, shattering the glass into 1,000 pieces. The sound echoed through the room, and for a moment, everything was still. Then, a dark mist poured out from the broken mirror, swirling around her like a storm. Clara felt a pull, as if the very essence of the reflection was trying to escape. She stumbled back, her heart racing as the mist coalesced into a figure, Eliza, her face twisted in rage and despair. "You fool!" Eliza screamed, her voice a cacophony of anguish. "You've doomed us both." The mist enveloped Clara, and she felt herself being pulled into the darkness. Memories flooded her mind, Eliza's life, her beauty, her tragic end. Clara realized that Eliza had been trapped not just in the mirror, but in her own pain and sorrow. In a moment of clarity, Clara reached out to Eliza, her voice steady. It was a rainy Friday night when Mark finished his shift at the diner. The streets were slick with water, reflecting the glow of the streetlights as he climbed into his old sedan. He was exhausted, ready to head home and unwind after a long week. As he started the engine, the familiar hum of the car was comforting, and he turned on the radio to drown out the sound of the rain. As he drove through the empty streets, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. It was a nagging sensation, like someone was watching him from the back seat. He glanced in the rearview mirror, but the back seat was empty, just shadows cast by the dim light of the dashboard. Shaking his head, he dismissed the feeling as paranoia. After all, it was late, and he was tired. The rain intensified, pounding against the windshield, and Mark focused on the road ahead. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing mile. He could almost sense a presence behind him, a weight in the air that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He stole another glance in the mirror, but still saw nothing. "Get a grip, Mark," he muttered to himself. "It's just the rain playing tricks on you." He turned up the radio, trying to drown out the unsettling feeling, but the music did little to ease his anxiety. As he approached a stoplight, he felt a chill wash over him. The light turned red, and he came to a halt. In the silence of the car, he could hear the rain tapping against the roof, but there was something else, a soft rustling sound from the back seat. His heart raced as he turned to look, but the darkness was impenetrable. "Hello?" he called out, his voice shaky. There was no response, just the sound of the rain. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "It's just your imagination," he reassured himself. The light turned green, and he pressed the gas pedal, eager to put distance between himself and the unsettling feeling. But as he drove, the rustling continued, growing louder and more insistent. It was as if something was shifting in the back seat, and Mark's heart raced with fear. He decided to take a detour, hoping to shake off the feeling. He turned onto a dark, winding road that led through the woods. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying in the wind, and the rain created a haunting melody as it drummed against the car. But the presence in the back seat only intensified. Suddenly, he heard a whisper, barely audible over the sound of the rain. "Mark," the voice was soft, almost pleading. He froze, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Who's there?" he shouted, panic rising in his chest. "Mark," the voice repeated, more insistent this time. He could feel his heart pounding in his ears as he glanced in the rearview mirror. The shadows seemed to shift, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw a figure, a woman with long, dark hair and hollow eyes staring back at him. Screaming, he slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop on the side of the road. The rain poured down, and he could barely see through the windshield. He turned to look in the back seat, but it was empty again. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of the rain. "Get out of the car," he shouted, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Show yourself." But there was no response, just the sound of the rain pounding against the metal. Mark's heart raced as he fumbled for his phone, ready to call for help. But as he reached for it, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck, sending chills down his spine. He turned slowly, and there she was, the woman from the mirror, her face twisted in anguish. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't find peace." Mark's breath caught in his throat. "What do you want from me?" he stammered, fear coursing through him. "I don't know how to help you." The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out a trembling hand. "You have to listen. I was taken. I need you to find me." In that moment, Mark felt a surge of empathy. He realized that this woman was not a malevolent spirit, she was a lost soul, trapped between worlds. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "How can I help you?" "Follow the path," she whispered, her voice fading. "You'll find the truth." Before he could respond, the figure vanished, leaving only the sound of the rain. Mark sat in stunned silence, his heart racing. He knew he had to act. The Johnson family was excited to move into their new home, a charming Victorian house nestled on the outskirts of a small town. With its tall windows, intricate woodwork, and sprawling yard, it was everything they had dreamed of. After weeks of searching, they finally found a place that felt like home. As they unpacked boxes and settled in, the children, Lily and Ben, explored every nook and cranny of the house. The attic, however, remained untouched. It was a dark, dusty space that seemed to loom above them, and the family had decided to leave it for another day. One evening, after a long day of unpacking, Lily and Ben were playing in their new rooms when they heard a soft thumping sound coming from above. They exchanged curious glances, their imaginations running wild. "What do you think it is?" Ben asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "Maybe it's a ghost," Lily replied, giggling nervously. The idea thrilled them, and they decided to investigate. They climbed the narrow staircase leading to the attic, their hearts racing with a mix of fear and excitement. As they reached the top, they pushed open the creaky door, revealing a dimly lit space filled with old furniture, boxes, and cobwebs. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of mildew hung in the air. They stepped inside, their flashlights illuminating the forgotten treasures of the past. "Look at this!" Ben exclaimed, pointing to an old trunk in the corner. They rushed over, eager to see what was inside. As they pried it open, they found a collection of old toys, clothes, and photographs. Among the items was a faded picture of a young girl with long, dark hair and a sad smile. "Who do you think she is?" Lily asked, holding the photograph up to the light. Just then, they heard the thumping sound again, louder this time, echoing through the attic. The children froze, their hearts pounding. "Maybe we should go back downstairs," Ben suggested, his voice trembling. But Lily, feeling brave, shook her head. "No, let's see what it is." As they ventured deeper into the attic, the thumping grew more rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. They followed the sound to a small door at the far end of the attic, partially hidden behind a stack of boxes. The door was slightly ajar, and a cold breeze wafted through the crack. "Should we open it?" Ben whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Together, Lily said, taking a deep breath. They pushed the door open, revealing a small, dark space beyond. The thumping was now accompanied by a soft, sorrowful whisper. "Help me." The children exchanged terrified glances, but curiosity got the better of them. They stepped inside, and the door creaked shut behind them. The room was filled with old furniture, but what caught their attention was a small, dusty mirror hanging on the wall. As they approached it, the whispers grew louder. "Help me, please." Lily reached out to touch the mirror, and as her fingers brushed the surface, the reflection shifted. Instead of their own faces, they saw the girl from the photograph, her eyes filled with sadness. "I'm trapped," she said, her voice echoing in the small room. "You have to help me." "Who are you?" Ben asked, his voice shaking. "I'm Emily," the girl replied. "I used to live here. I was taken away, and now I can't leave. You have to find my locket. It's hidden in the house. If you bring it to me, I can be free." The children felt a surge of determination. "We'll help you, Emily," Lily promised. "Where do we start?" "Look in the basement," Emily whispered, her image flickering in the mirror. "It's where I last saw it." With newfound courage, Lily and Ben hurried back to the attic door, pushing it open and racing down the stairs. They reached the basement door, which creaked ominously as they opened it. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old boxes and forgotten memories. "Where do we look?" Ben asked, scanning the room. "Over there." Lily pointed to a stack of boxes in the corner. They began to dig through the clutter, their hearts racing with anticipation. After what felt like an eternity, Ben pulled out a small, ornate box covered in dust. "Is this it?" he asked, holding it up. Lily nodded, her eyes wide. They opened the box, and inside lay a delicate silver locket, its surface tarnished but still beautiful. "This has to be it," she exclaimed. With the locket in hand, they rushed back to the attic, their hearts pounding with excitement. They reached the small room and approached the mirror once more. It was a chilly Friday evening when Sarah arrived at the Thompsons' house to babysit their two children, Emily and Jake. The parents had a dinner reservation and were excited for a night out, leaving Sarah in charge of the kids. She had babysat for them several times before, and the children adored her. As she entered the house, the familiar scent of popcorn wafted through the air, and the sound of laughter echoed from the living room. "Hey, you two!" Sarah called out, smiling as she found Emily and Jake sprawled on the floor, engrossed in a movie. "What are we watching?" "Frozen." Emily squealed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Jake, a bit older and more reserved, nodded in agreement. Sarah settled onto the couch with them, and they enjoyed the movie together, laughing and singing along to the songs. As the night wore on, the children eventually grew tired and headed to bed. Sarah tucked them in, reading them a story before turning off the lights. She made her way back to the living room, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. The house was quiet, and she settled onto the couch, scrolling through her phone while keeping an ear out for any sounds from the kids. About an hour later, just as she was starting to doze off, the phone rang. Startled, Sarah picked it up, glancing at the caller ID. It was the Thompsons. "Hello?" she answered, expecting to hear their voices. "Sarah, is everything okay?" Mrs. Thompson's voice came through, laced with concern. "Yeah, everything's fine. The kids are asleep," Sarah replied, feeling a sense of relief. "Good. We just wanted to check in. Are you sure everything is all right?" Mrs. Thompson asked, her voice growing more anxious. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" Sarah said, a hint of confusion in her tone. "Just, make sure you keep the doors locked." "We'll be home soon," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice trembling slightly. "Okay, I will. See you soon," Sarah replied, hanging up the phone. She felt a strange unease settle over her, but she brushed it off. The Thompsons were probably just being cautious. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, it was a private number. Sarah hesitated but answered it, thinking it might be the parents again. "Hello? Is the babysitter there?" a low, gravelly voice asked. "Who is this?" Sarah replied, her heart racing. The voice sent chills down her spine. "Is the babysitter there?" the voice repeated, more insistent this time. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her voice shaking. She glanced toward the hallway, half expecting to see the children standing there. "Check the kids," the voice said, and then the line went dead. Panic surged through Sarah. She jumped up and rushed down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached the children's room and pushed the door open, her breath hitching in her throat. The beds were empty. "Emily? Jake?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no response. She felt a wave of dread wash over her as she turned on the light, scanning the room. The window was slightly ajar, and the curtains fluttered in the breeze. Just then, her phone buzzed again. It was a text from Mrs. Thompson, "We're on our way home. Are the kids okay?" Sarah quickly typed back, "They're not in their room." Her fingers trembled as she hit send. She felt a surge of fear as she realized the implications of the call she had just received. She rushed back to the living room, her mind racing. She needed to call the police. As she reached for her phone, it rang again. This time, it was a call from the Thompsons' home number. Confused, she answered it. "Hello? Sarah, is everything okay?" Mrs. Thompson's voice came through again, but it sounded different, more frantic. "Mrs. Thompson, the kids are missing," Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. "Sarah, listen to me carefully," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice trembling. "Get out of the house. Now." "What? Why?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. "Because the call is coming from inside the house," Mrs. Thompson shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Before Sarah could respond, she heard a noise behind her, a soft giggle, followed by the sound of footsteps. She turned slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. There, standing in the doorway, were Emily and Jake, their faces pale and wide-eyed. "Sarah, we were just playing hide and seek," Emily said innocently. But Sarah's instincts kicked in. She didn't have time to process what was happening. "Get back." It had been 3 years since Sarah's best friend, Mia, had vanished without a trace. They had been inseparable since childhood, sharing secrets, dreams, and countless memories. But one fateful night, Mia had gone out for a walk and never returned. The police had searched tirelessly, but there were no leads, no signs of struggle, just an empty space where Mia used to be. The loss weighed heavily on Sarah. She often found herself scrolling through old photos on her phone, reminiscing about the laughter they shared. Friends and family had tried to help her move on, but the ache of Mia's absence lingered like a shadow. One evening, as Sarah sat on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, expecting a message from one of her friends. But when she saw the name, her heart stopped. It was Mia. "Mia?" Sarah whispered, her hands trembling as she opened the message. The text read, "Help me. I'm still here." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It had to be a mistake, a cruel prank. But as she read the message again, a chill ran down her spine. The message was sent from Mia's old number, the one Sarah had saved years ago. She quickly typed back, her fingers shaking. "Mia? Is this really you?" There was a long pause before the reply came through. "I don't have much time. They're watching me. Please, you have to find me." Panic surged through Sarah. "Where are you? What happened?" she typed, her heart racing. She felt a mix of hope and dread, unsure of what to believe. "I can't say. Just know that I'm not safe." "You have to trust me," Mia replied. "Look for the old oak tree by the river. It's where we used to play." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as memories flooded back, days spent climbing that very tree, laughing and dreaming of the future. "I'll go there. I promise," she typed back, her resolve strengthening. "Just hold on, Mia. I'm coming." After a few moments, another message appeared. "Be careful. They don't want you to find me." Sarah grabbed her jacket and rushed out the door, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The night was dark, and the air was thick with tension as she made her way to the river. The familiar path felt surreal, each step echoing with memories of happier times. When she reached the old oak tree, she paused, scanning the area for any signs of Mia. The tree stood tall and imposing, its branches swaying gently in the wind. "Mia," she called out, her voice trembling. "Are you here?" Silence enveloped her, and for a moment, doubt crept in. What if this was all a cruel joke? But then her phone buzzed again, and she quickly checked the screen. "Look behind you," the message read. Sarah's heart raced as she turned slowly, her breath hitching in her throat. There, partially hidden in the shadows, was a figure. It was a woman, her hair long and disheveled, her clothes tattered and dirty. Sarah's heart leaped as she recognized her friend. "Mia," she cried, rushing forward. But as she got closer, she noticed something was off. Mia's eyes were wide with fear, and her expression was one of desperation. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, glancing nervously around. "What happened to you?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "I thought you were gone." "I was taken," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've been keeping me here, watching me. I don't know how long I've been trapped." "You have to leave before they find you too." "No. I'm not leaving you." Sarah insisted, tears streaming down her face. "We'll figure this out together." Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the bushes nearby, and Mia's eyes widened in terror. "They're here," she gasped. "Run, Sarah. You have to go." Before Sarah could react, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its face obscured. "You shouldn't have come here," it growled, advancing toward them. In a surge of adrenaline, Sarah grabbed Mia's hand, and they turned to flee. They sprinted through the trees, the sound of footsteps pounding behind them. "This way!" Mia shouted, leading Sarah toward the riverbank. As they reached the water's edge, Sarah's heart raced. "What do we do?" she cried, glancing back at the approaching figure. "Jump!" Mia urged, and without hesitation, they leaped into the cold water. The shock of the icy river enveloped them, and they swam frantically, trying to put distance between. In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there was an old antique shop known as Whispers of the Past. The shop was filled with relics from bygone eras, each with its own story to tell. Among the dusty shelves and cobwebbed corners, one item stood out, a porcelain doll with striking blue eyes and a delicate lace dress. Its name was Annabelle. The doll had been in the shop for years, but it had never found a buyer. Locals whispered about its eerie presence, claiming that it seemed to move when no one was watching. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hargrove, dismissed the rumors as mere superstition, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unusual about Annabelle. One rainy afternoon, a young girl named Lily entered the shop with her mother. Lily was immediately drawn to the doll, her eyes wide with fascination. "Mom, can I have her?" she pleaded. Mrs. Hargrove, sensing the girl's genuine affection, reluctantly agreed to sell the doll, warning Lily to take good care of it. That night, as the storm raged outside, Lily placed Annabelle on her bedside table. The doll seemed to glow in the dim light, and Lily felt a strange connection to it. As she drifted off to sleep, she thought she heard a soft whisper, but she dismissed it as the wind. The following days were filled with joy for Lily. She played with Annabelle, dressing her in different outfits and telling her stories. However, as the days turned into weeks, strange occurrences began to unfold. Lily would find Annabelle in different positions than where she had left her, and sometimes, the doll's eyes seemed to follow her around the room. One evening, Lily's mother, Sarah, noticed the doll sitting upright on the shelf, even though she was sure she had placed it lying down. "Lily, did you move Annabelle?" she asked, a hint of concern in her voice. "No, Mom. I swear I didn't," Lily replied, her voice trembling. As the weeks passed, the atmosphere in the house grew tense. Lily began to have nightmares, filled with dark shadows and whispers that echoed in her mind. She would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, convinced that someone was watching her. Sarah, worried for her daughter, decided to investigate the doll. One night, while Lily slept, Sarah took Annabelle into the living room. She examined the doll closely, searching for any hidden mechanisms that could explain its strange behavior. As she turned the doll over, she noticed a small, faded tag sewn into the fabric of its dress. It read, "Beware the one who awakens her." Chilled to the bone, Sarah returned the doll to Lily's room, but the unease only grew. The whispers became louder, and Lily's nightmares intensified. One night, Sarah was awakened by a loud crash. Rushing to Lily's room, she found the doll on the floor, its porcelain face cracked. Lily was sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I can't take it anymore. Annabelle is scaring me." Determined to rid their home of the doll, Sarah decided to return it to the antique shop. The next day, she and Lily walked to Whispers of the Past. As they entered, Mrs. Hargrove looked up, her expression grave. "I see you've brought Annabelle back," she said softly. "I warned you, didn't I?" "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, bewildered. "Annabelle is not just a doll. She holds the spirit of a little girl who once lived in this town. She was lost too soon, and her spirit has been trapped within the doll. Some say she seeks companionship, while others believe she brings misfortune to those who possess her." Horrified, Sarah realized the gravity of their situation. "What can we do?" she asked desperately. Mrs. Hargrove sighed. "The only way to free her is to find someone who can help. There are rituals, but they require a pure heart and a willingness to listen." With no other options, Sarah and Lily agreed to seek help. They found a local medium who specialized in communicating with spirits. During the session, the medium revealed that Annabelle was lonely and wanted to be loved, but her presence had become twisted over the years. With the medium's guidance, they performed a ritual to release Annabelle's spirit. As they chanted, the room filled with a warm light, and the whispers transformed into soft laughter. In that moment, Lily felt a sense of peace wash over her, as if Annabelle was finally free. After the ritual, the doll was left behind at the shop, where it would remain, waiting for the next child who might need a friend. Lily and her mother returned home, relieved but forever changed. In the heart of a bustling city stood an old, decrepit building known as the Ashford Tower. Once a grand hotel, it had fallen into disrepair, its faded glory overshadowed by urban legends and ghost stories. Among the tales that circulated among the locals was one about a game called the Elevator Game. It was said that if you followed the specific steps while riding the elevator, you could access another dimension, a place where reality twisted and shadows danced. Curiosity piqued, a group of friends, Maya, Jake, and Sarah, decided to explore the Ashford Tower one fateful evening. They had heard whispers about the game and were eager to test their courage. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, they entered the building, the air thick with dust and the scent of mildew. The elevator was old, its metal doors creaking as they pried them open. Inside, the dim light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Maya pulled out her phone, reading the instructions they had found online. Enter the elevator alone. Press the button for the 4th floor. When you reach the 4th floor, do not exit. Press the button for the 2nd floor. When you reach the 2nd floor, press the button for the 6th floor. Then, press the button for the 2nd floor again. Finally, press the button for the 10th floor. If done correctly, you will reach a different dimension. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, Maya stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut behind her. The others waited outside, their hearts racing as they listened to the elevator's mechanical whirring. After a moment, the elevator jolted to a stop, and Maya pressed the button for the 2nd floor. As the elevator descended, a chill swept through the air. The lights flickered again, and Maya felt a strange sensation, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting. When the doors opened, she pressed the button for the 6th floor, her heart pounding in her chest. The 6th floor was dark and silent. Maya hesitated, but the thrill of the game pushed her forward. She pressed the button for the 2nd floor again, and the elevator began to rise. As it ascended, she felt a sudden lurch, as if the elevator had hit an invisible barrier. When the doors opened on the 2nd floor, Maya stepped out, but the hallway was different. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the air was thick with an unsettling stillness. She called out to Jake and Sarah, but her voice echoed back, swallowed by the oppressive silence. Panic set in as she realized she was alone. The elevator doors slid shut behind her, and she turned to see the numbers above the door flickering erratically. She pressed the button for the 10th floor, desperate to escape the eerie atmosphere. As the elevator ascended, Maya felt a cold breeze brush past her, and the lights flickered violently. When the doors opened, she was met with a scene that sent chills down her spine. The 10th floor was a mirror image of the previous one, but everything was distorted. The walls seemed to pulse, and shadows danced in the corners of her vision. "Maya," a voice called out, but it wasn't Jake or Sarah. It was a low, haunting whisper that echoed through the hallway. She turned, her heart racing, and saw a figure standing at the end of the corridor. It was a woman, her face obscured by long, dark hair, and her clothes tattered and worn. "Come play with me," the woman beckoned, her voice sweet yet sinister. Maya's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. The woman took a step closer, and Maya finally broke free from her paralysis, sprinting back to the elevator. She pressed the button frantically, praying it would take her back to the safety of the ground floor. The doors slid shut just as the woman reached out for her, and the elevator began to descend. Maya's heart raced as she felt the weight of the otherworldly presence pressing against her. The lights flickered, and she could hear the woman's laughter echoing in her mind. When the elevator finally reached the ground floor, the doors opened, and Maya stumbled out, gasping for breath. Jake and Sarah were waiting, their faces pale with worry. "Maya. What happened?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. I don't know. I saw someone. We have to get out of here," she cried, her eyes wide with fear. The three friends rushed toward the exit, but as they reached the front doors, they found them locked tight. Panic surged through them as they pulled and pushed, but the doors wouldn't budge. The air grew heavy, and the lights flickered ominously. Suddenly, the elevator doors opened again, and the woman stepped.